Coming up on Market to Market, Willie Nelson blasts a controversial proposal to build the Keystone XL pipeline. USDA analysts offer a mixed assessment of U.S. grain and oilseed supplies. And conservation efforts by farmers help fishermen angle for a better catch. Those stories and market analysis with John Roach next.
Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. And by Sukup Manufacturing Company, offering a full line of grain drying and storage equipment and steel buildings. Sukup Manufacturing is on a mission to protect and preserve your crop and the tools that produce it. This is the Friday, October 3 edition of Market to Market, the weekly journal of rural America.
Hello, I'm Mike Pearson. A surge of hiring last month helped reduce America's unemployment rate to a level not seen since the Great Recession. According to the Labor Department, U.S. employers added 248,000 new workers to their payrolls in September, while the nation's unemployment rate fell to a six-year low of 5.9%. Separately, the government reports America's trade deficit shrank in August as total exports rose to an all-time high. U.S. exports of petroleum, for example, increased by 2.2% last month, while petroleum imports fell 3.8%. America, however, still relies on foreign suppliers for a significant portion of its oil. And last year, the U.S. imported more than 1 billion barrels of crude from Canada. But a languishing proposal to build the 1,700-mile pipeline that would funnel oil from the Great White North to U.S. refineries is controversial, to say the least. And late last week, Willie Nelson was on the road again, speaking against the project.
Whiskey River, take my mind.
Over 7,000 concert goers descended on the small town of Neely, Nebraska, to hear musicians lend their voices in the fight over the Keystone XL pipeline. Music legends Willie Nelson and Neil Young added their voices in support of Bold, Nebraska, a patchwork of concerned Nebraska farmers, ranchers, urban environmentalists, and Native Americans who have successfully circled the wagons to keep the $7 billion pipeline project in legal limbo.
We have been trying to figure out what to do about the farmers and their situation for 29 years. And for 29 years, the corporations have continued to take the land away from the small family farmers.
Calgary, Alberta-based TransCanada claims the construction of a state-of-the-art pipeline to deliver Canadian oil sands crude to Gulf Coast refineries would bring much-needed jobs and bolster North American energy independence. But grassroots resistance has crusaded against the venture, citing the possibility of negative environmental impacts. The primary concern is potential damage to the Ogallala Aquifer. Lying beneath the majority of Nebraska and portions of 7 other states, the underground reservoir is the major source of water for irrigated crops in the region's semi-arid climate. While protesters raise concerns about safeguarding Nebraska's natural resources, a major Canadian commodity is bulging at the seams to find a market by traveling through the Midwestern state. Critics claim labor-intensive methods which extract the so-called dirty oil releases exorbitant amounts of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere, which may accelerate climate change. In the interim of a resolution on Keystone XL, Canadian crude has ridden the rails, but not without drastic consequences. Since 2008, 10 derailments have occurred on American and Canadian railways as a highly volatile mixture of chemicals and crude traverses North America. Derailments and safety issues on both sides of the border have resulted in fires, explosions, and fatalities. The rush to rail has also created a bottleneck for the nation's farmers, whose harvested grain is stuck waiting for a ride to market. Last year, U.S. railways moved 415,000 carloads of crude, reflecting an increase of more than 4,000% from the previous 6 years. Those opposed to Keystone XL claim the debate has moved beyond rail or pipeline, saying instead the entire fossil fuel approach to energy needs an overhaul.
We're all being wind burnt and sunburnt and blown by the wind, and yet, with the exception of the solar charging station, you see nary a solar panel or a wind turbine in sight. Oil is no longer a part of the equation, in my opinion. We need to get away from that mentality.
While some envision a day when renewable energy replaces fossil fuels, petroleum industry insiders argue that crude is already playing a pivotal role in America's move toward energy independence.
This is a tremendous opportunity to increase our energy security. We could be 100% energy secure in just 10 short years, and that's a tremendous opportunity.
And at least one landowner voiced his support for the pipeline due to its potential impact on the labor market in Nebraska and other states along the Keystone Route.
They can come tomorrow because there's plenty of jobs that people need, not only in this state, but other states from Canada all the way to Texas, that we ought to be utilizing those people and be putting them to work.
Federal biologists reported this week that water use and other actions by the marijuana industry in Northern California and Southern Oregon are threatening salmon, which were already at risk of extinction. Like other species in the West, coho salmon have lost habitat due to logging, urban development, agriculture, overfishing, and dams. Unfortunately, the coho aren't the only fish facing man-made perils. But an ambitious effort in the Corn Belt, of all places, is uniting farmers and fishermen in the quest for a better catch. David Miller explains.
When the critically acclaimed film A River Runs Through It was released in 1992, it drew thousands of tourists to Montana and helped rejuvenate local economies and waterways. It also introduced a whole new generation to the art of fly fishing. But the beauty and skill showcased so vividly in the movie isn't limited to Western states. And if you look hard enough, it can even be found in the heart of the Corn Belt.
Oh, there's another one. Oh! Woo. Another brownie.
It makes me feel like I'm in the mountains and I'm a long ways from work and everything else, and this is one of the prettiest places I fish, and I get here as often as I can.
For Kleckner, who is president of the Driftless chapter of Trout Unlimited, as well as a fishing guide and owner of the Decorah, Iowa-based Bear Creek Anglers, this is more than just another day wading in cold water. He knows each trout he catches and releases is there because a large number of people have been working together for more than 80 years. The trout come from two sources: the native populations that swim in North Bear Creek, and others stocked by the Iowa Department of Natural Resources from the nearby Decorah Fish Hatchery. But preserving and expanding populations of brown, brook, and rainbow trout in northeastern Iowa is much more involved than simply restocking local streams. Trout thrive in fast-moving 50-degree water and need a gravel-covered stream bed to survive. The spring-fed creeks in northeastern Iowa are the perfect habitat for these fish. Rainbow and brook trout are native to the region, and brown trout were introduced in the 1880s. But as farming and industrialization grew, trout numbers began to decline, and in the 1930s, efforts to help bring back dwindling populations were started. Efforts have really kicked into high gear during the past 2 decades as a strong relationship between farmers, the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, and the Federal Natural Resources Conservation Service has been forged. Prior to his retiring from the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, Bill Kalishek worked with farmers in the region to help restore trout streams for more than 25 years.
My experience with farmers has been that most farmers want to do the right thing. They want to do what is correct for the resource and correct for the stream that flows through their property. Now, sometimes they aren't able to do the right thing because of economic or social issues that come into play. And then there is that small percentage that doesn't care about doing the right thing. And unfortunately, when you're talking about trout streams that have very small watersheds, just 1 or 2 really bad fields of high erosion can have a big impact on that small stream. As you find a cooperating landowner, or as you decide that there's a piece of state property, a section of stream on state property that needs to have some rehabilitation work, you start to do that work, and as other landowners see that, they start to realize that's a good project. I want to see that happen on my property too.
Since the early 1990s, projects have included seeding riparian areas next to the stream to filter water and hold back the soil, placing riprap along the stream banks to reduce erosion, adding bank hides to give trout a place to escape from predators, and the installation of fences to keep cattle out of the water. Private contractors do much of the construction, but there are some projects that only happen because of volunteer labor and donated materials. According to the Iowa DNR, anglers make more than 500,000 trips to Hawkeye State trout streams and inject more than $14 million into Iowa's economy every year. Efforts by landowners, volunteers, and government agencies have helped clean up the water and keep gravel stream beds clear of silt, allowing trout to lay their eggs. Those efforts have helped re-establish naturally reproducing trout in more than 40 of Iowa's 105 trout streams. An example of where the cooperation between farmers and government yielded results can be seen at Valley View Farm, where Walter Langland and his son Steve run a diversified grain and livestock operation in rural Winneshiek County. In 1993, the elder Langlands started the first of several restoration projects by fencing off the riparian section along North Bear Creek to keep the cattle out of the stream.
It makes me feel good that someone else can enjoy fishing along a stream that has good access to it.
Some of Langland's other projects include stream bank restoration, bank hides, and the creation of a parking lot for anglers.
Well, this is the Century Farm. I don't know who is going to carry on it after my wife and I and son are gone, but we need to care for the land for future generations.
Not far away, Jason Howe runs Howland Hills Farm in rural Alameda County. Howe sought help from the DNR more than a decade ago to restore the land along his section of Patterson Creek near Waukon.
I was kind of tired of seeing all that good topsoil washed away, and so I had went to them and asked about it, and I think around the same time as when I was wanting to get the trout, see if I could get the trout to start reproducing, wondering what that would take, and spoke with the DNR about that, and most years I'll do one or two of the worst banks, I guess, to kind of keep them from eroding away, and it's been working out pretty good.
Howe spent his summer days on the creek when he was young, and his children are continuing the tradition of fishing, swimming, and playing in the water. For Kleckner, just catching the trout tells him things are improving as more soil remains in nearby farm fields and out of the stream.
Having a pretty stream with nice rocky banks and all that sort of thing is important, and that's nice. However, if the farmers don't take care of the 500 or 1,000 acres that they're farming that's in the watershed, pretty stream banks aren't going to help natural reproduction of brown trout. So, I mean, it's all the farmers taking care of the watershed that has allowed us to have natural brown trout reproduction going on here, and for me, that's pretty exciting.
The ideal of farmers and environmentalists sharing common goals of protecting and enhancing natural resources on which both depend often seems to be elusive these days. But the synergy is evident in northeastern Iowa and could easily have served as the inspiration for Pulitzer Prize-winning author Norman Maclean, who once wrote, "Eventually, all things merge into one, and a river runs through it." For Market to Market, I'm David Miller.
Next, the Market to Market report.
Despite the Agriculture Department's generally bearish quarterly stocks reports estimates and a resurgent U.S. dollar, wheat prices rallied. For the week, September wheat gained 14 cents, while the nearby corn contract moved fractionally higher as well. USDA's stocks estimates revealing a larger drawdown of soybean supplies than expected failed to give those prices much of a lift. But the modest 2-cent gain gave the November contract its first winning week in the past 6. Nearby meal prices went the other way, giving up $2.30 per ton. In the softs, cotton traded sideways as the December contract lost a penny per hundredweight. In the dairy market, October Class 3 milk lost 6 cents, while the deferred contract was off 38 cents. But the big story this week was in the livestock sector, where prices soared to all-time highs again as the December cattle contract gained $3.77. Nearby feeders advanced by more than $9, but the lean hog contract lost $1.45. In the financials, the euro gave up 17 basis points against the dollar. Crude oil fell below the $90 mark and settled with a weekly loss of $3.80 per barrel. COMEX gold declined by more than $22 per ounce, and the Goldman Sachs Commodity Index lost nearly 16 points to settle at 566.55. Here now to lend us his insight on these and other trends is our senior market analyst, John Roach. John, welcome back.
Thanks, Mike.
As we touched on there in the overview, the dollar is resurgent. We are climbing to highs not seen in quite a while. What's driving that?
I think it's the economy. The U.S. economy continues to percolate. We saw the jobs report today that was a very positive number. At the same time, we have the European economy struggling with the interest rates being cut. And they instituted a kind of a QE, a European brand of quantitative analysis, and concern with the situation with Russia and Ukraine and so forth. So there are several things that are bothering that sector, that particular area of the world. Chinese concerns about their economy may be having some problems, and certainly the problems going on in Hong Kong. And then Africa with Ebola. So if you just look at around the world, the United States looks to be a safer place with a better working economy than some of the other places.
And our version of QE is wrapping up, or at least the monthly bond purchase program is coming to an end here shortly. So it's kind of the direct comparison to Europe.
Exactly. We're just the opposite, though.
Yes.
We're on the mend,
right,
and they're finally taking the medicine.
You bet.
And so interest rates are likely to rise in this country. At least that's the attitude of people, that they're going to rise as we move through time. And so money's moving into this country as a safe haven and as a place for perhaps better returns.
All right. Well, with all that being said, then help us puzzle through this wheat move this week. We saw a fairly large move to the upside on December wheat, 13.5 cents. What's driving that with the supply of wheat and the resurgent U.S. dollar? What's driving the wheat market?
We're seeing world demand pick up. We're seeing the price levels in European wheat cheap. It's so cheap that the Russians aren't selling anymore. And so we're starting to see prices starting to percolate a little bit. And then in the Chicago wheat, we had record short positions on the part of spec traders coming into this week. And so the desire to get out of the way of the market a little bit as it's starting to show a little bit of an upward turn, it's speculative short covering.
So at this level, should producers be out there making sales, or are we not quite to that price point yet, do you figure?
I think we're just up off the bottom a little bit. We're very close to the 20-day moving average. If we can clear the 20-day moving average a little bit of power, we're going to get in more short covering to come into the marketplace. So our attitude at this point is be patient. All the grains, you need to have a level of patience if you're a seller. We're in really the wrong time of year.
Certainly, if you've waited this long, you've been patient, continue to be patient.
Well, selling in October is just normally not the recipe for success. You should only be selling in October because you failed to make sales earlier in the year. So now's the time to be storing and waiting.
All right. With that being said, let's jump into the corn market. We are hearing tremendous yield reports across the country. What have you been hearing from your customers?
Excellent yields. There are some areas that have some disappointing yields, but by and large, the yields are very strong and at record levels in many of the main production areas.
And FC Stone came out this week with a yield, I believe, of 177 or 178. Does that seem to be in the ballpark, significantly higher than USDA's estimate?
We think it is significantly higher than the USDA estimate, and we think that number is appropriate. The yield estimates that we're seeing out of Illinois, where we've seen lots of harvest, our average is 220 bushels an acre. I think FC Stone was 221 bushels an acre. So very large yields are being reported. Now, we have to be a little bit careful because we haven't gotten into some of those areas of the state where maybe the yields will slip off a little. We think it could come down a little bit, at least in northern Illinois, but we'll just have to wait and see. And there's a lot of areas that have just barely started harvest, so we're really a little early yet to have a lot of confidence in the numbers, but we're sure not going to argue with anybody who says it's a big crop. It's just a question of how big is it.
Okay. Now, that being said, for producers out there who have waited and they're still waiting, is storage going to be a concern as we head into this winter?
I think storage is going to be a real concern. We're going to fill all the storage, and we're going to go into lots of different temporary storage kind of facilities, and so I think it will be a concern. But to the degree that you can, we think you should try to hang on to the crop and look for better prices as we get out of the harvest season.
Now, as we talk about the corn market, we've got a question here from one of our viewers submitted via Twitter, Tim in Nevada, Iowa at Cowser Cattle. He's curious, with these low prices and with what we've been seeing in crude oil, he says ethanol production is down again, and he's curious, are margins, transportation, or maintenance to blame for the ethanol production falling off?
Margins. The price of ethanol has fallen faster than the price of corn. And as a consequence, the margins are some of the smallest they've been in months, and the production numbers have been coming down because of that.
All right. So that's what, any change to that going forward? Does the market seem to be stabilizing on ethanol?
The interesting thing that's going on is that oil prices are cheapening. And as oil prices cheapen, then of course that puts the competition up against the ethanol, and our usage levels are down. So a combination there of things that are pressing on the margins for ethanol producers.
Kind of the triple threat.
Triple threat. That's a good, exactly.
Well, let's jump over to soybeans, where we did have, as we mentioned coming into it, the first positive week in several weeks, 6 weeks, I believe. And does that signify that we found some stability in this market, do you believe, or maybe just a temporary holding before we get farther into harvest?
I think the market's really trying to find the bottom, and whether we've found the bottom now or we've got to muddy around here for a while longer and find the bottom a little bit later, we'll see. Right now, harvest is getting slowed by rain, and we may drag this harvest out so we start getting worried that we leave some of it in the field. But at the moment, I wouldn't say that we've seen the bottoms yet, but we're not very far away from them if we haven't.
Okay. Now, as we look out to the future, we do have some decent carry in the soybean market as well as in the corn market. Is it time to make some deferred sales, or would you still advise wait and hopefully get a full rally again after harvest?
I would wait for some price recovery. The market has slid down with all the negative news, and even the bigger yield estimates that we saw this week, they really didn't have much of an impact on the price. So the market's adjusted to these big crops, and now we're just waiting to see, okay, how does this harvest process go, and as we go through the harvest period, we think that the users will step up and clean up all of the available supplies because these represent some extremely good price levels for them to acquire ownership.
All right. Well, now let's jump down into the livestock markets. We've seen tremendous volatility and activity in all the meats. As we take a look at fat cattle, the way things sit today, has consumer demand come back enough to justify these record high prices? Is that what we're seeing?
Well, I mean, it's the dressed beef market that's up here, and although we may be seeing the future starting to lead the cash market a little bit here, we're dealing with very strong levels of demand for relatively tight supplies. And so you move prices up to new highs this week, and there's really nothing on the horizon that would make us think this market's over with yet, that we're done. But we are, that being said, we are getting sell signals on fat cattle, and so we would, if you're looking for a spot to be hedging up some cattle, this is a spot to get started doing that.
That being said, what would be the best way to put some hedges in place? Do you sell the futures directly, put a put in place? How do you protect your price here?
I think at these price levels that you just sell futures. You just say, I'm willing to take this price, and market sold. If you're not willing to take the price, then just be patient, because the market's really not showing any sign here of running out of gas.
All right. Well, now as we look at the feeder cattle side, tremendous week $9 move in the feeder cattle market. What happened? What was driving that this week?
The availability of corn. It's one thing to say that there's a big crop out there. It's another thing to actually be able to get your hands on the corn. We finally started getting our hands on, or the producers were able to get their hands on corn. And as they were able to do that, they quickly bid the feeder cattle market up in order to make use of that cheaper priced corn.
So as we look to the future, as corn piles start forming in the countryside, there's still room to move in this market, do you believe?
I think there is. I think the market could move on higher. But if you're in the market to sell feeders, the right time to do that's probably sometime here in October or early November, when we see the availability as big as it's ever going to be for corn, and the price probably as cheap as it's going to be.
Now, we touched earlier on the ethanol margins affecting ethanol production. Does the market anticipate that to have much of an effect on DDGs or modified distillers grains as we look into this next year?
Well, DDGs compare straight across to the price of corn and involving a little bit of meal as a higher protein level. But as corn prices have gone down, DDGs have come down as well, and that's taken away part of the margin in the ethanol business. The likelihood is that that's going to continue to be the case, that the DDGs will be priced relative to corn, and with the corn prices cheap, then DDGs are as well.
All right.
The DDGs carried a significant percentage of that ethanol crush margin, and it's lost that value.
All right. Now, John, before we let you go, real quick, let's talk about the hog market. Saw a bit of a step back this week. Is that going to continue?
I think hog market's going to get better. I think we're at a cheaper level here, and that we'll have stronger prices as we move out into the future. I wouldn't look for a huge move, but I think a better price than what we're getting right now. Our slaughter numbers are too low relative to the spring pig report.
All right. Well, John Roach, thanks for taking the time to be with us this week.
Thank you very much, Mike.
That wraps up this edition of Market to Market, but we'll continue our discussion and answer some of your questions in our Market Plus segment online. You'll also find audio podcasts and streaming video of our program, as well as links to our Twitter feed, Facebook page, and the rest of our social media outlets exclusively at the Market to Market website. And be sure to join us next week when we'll learn how a baseball park built in a cornfield 25 years ago continues to draw fans. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Mike Pearson. Have a great week. Going up.
Market to Market is a production of Iowa Public Television, which is solely responsible for its content. Funding for Market to Market is provided by Grinnell Mutual. You think differently about a customer when you stand in the middle of his dreams. We work to make sure you get covered right. Grinnell Mutual, a policy of working together. Information on finding an agent near you is available at grinnellmutual.com. And by Sukup Manufacturing Company. Offering a full line of grain drying and storage equipment and steel buildings, Sukup Manufacturing is on a mission to protect and preserve your crop and the tools that produce it.